Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. And as I said, I will continue to let people in as they join the meeting. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kim Kislowski, the Executive Vice President for Visit Chicago Southland. We're excited to host this webinar focused on ADA compliance for websites. It's an important topic that helps ensure that our online content is accessible and welcoming to all users. So I'm pleased to introduce our partner, Randy McDaniels from McDaniels Marketing. Randy and his team have partnered with us on numerous marketing projects over the years. I've had the opportunity to see this presentation in person at an IDA meeting just a month or so ago, and I knew it was going to be valuable, and I wanted to share it with all of our partners. Before we get started, though, I just wanted to mention a quick housekeeping note. I have muted everybody. If you need to ask a question, please do it in the chat, and I will be sure to monitor that. We will make sure everyone's questions are addressed. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Randy.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate it. And I'm really happy to be able to be here this morning to be able to provide this very important presentation. Again, my name's Randy McDaniels, President of McDaniels Marketing. We're a place marketing firm. I've been in business for close to 60 years now and been involved with helping destinations market themselves since about 2003. And then to my right, I have Zach Singleton. He is one of our SEO specialists and has prepared and will give this presentation this morning about ADA compliance for websites. To kind of draw the picture and frame the picture around this, there's really three reasons why you'd want to pay attention to this topic. And one would be compliance with the federal government if you get any federal funding, right? So some organizations get federal funding. There's going to be some regulations coming forth over the next 2 years for that reason. Second would be to avoid lawsuits. There are a lot of law firms that are suing private businesses and organizations when they detect a site is not compliant. And third would be to do the right thing, to make your site come ADA accessible, right? Accessible for especially blind users, but other people with impairments so they can connect with you properly over the website. So with that, I'll give it over to Zach and I'll let him get started. And then again, Kim, just let us know when there are questions. We can't see the chat on our screen right now, so just let us know and we can answer those accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah, like Randy said, I'm Zach. I'm really excited to be here. And as they mentioned, this is a lot of information that I'm going to be giving you. And so if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. There we go. So what we're going to be talking about today is web accessibility. Web accessibility, it's the practice of ensuring that people with disabilities can effectively perceive, navigate, interact with, and contribute to the content on your business's website. We're all very familiar with what does accessibility, ADA, look like for physical spaces, adding a ramp, making doorways a certain width, that sort of thing. But we're talking today about what does it look like to make a website accessible. So the reason this is important, customers research businesses online before ever visiting. So you think about when you're, going to a brand new restaurant or you're shopping for a specific thing, often the first thing you're going to do is pull out your phone, do a little bit of research about the place you're planning on going, and deciding then whether or not you want to go there. So having that online presence is really important. Digital accessibility builds trust and confidence for guests and patrons with disabilities. So, you think about somebody who is disabled, they're planning on going somewhere. They want to know that they're going to be welcome when they get there. And so often they're doing a lot of extra research to know, is there that ramp? And if their website isn't accessible, they're going to be less likely to trust that the physical space is accessible as well. So ADA requires equal access to all. But many sites fall short. Actually, what you'll see is most sites fall short. But there's a lot of opportunities, like I've kind of mentioned, from digital advancement. So customers can expect accurate, detailed information online before they visit. If they do get that information they're looking for just by a Google search or going to a Google business profile, that's huge, a huge win for you and people's first step to go into your business. Online ordering, reservations, scheduling, give people with disabilities confidence. And digital touchpoints are often the first impression for your business. But there's some gaps. So like I said, about 95.9% of websites fall short of the WCAG standards. And what the WCAG standards are, those are basically the standards by which the government decides whether or not something is ADA compliant. So we'll go through that a little bit later. A business web presence is almost as important as its physical space, like we've mentioned. And some common barriers include just poor color contrast. So making sure, the text on the screen is in contrast enough with the background for you to be able to read it, especially people with visual impairments. Missing alt image tags, inaccessible forms, timeouts, those sort of things. We'll go into more detail a little bit later, but there are a lot of gaps that you have to address in order to be conformant with the ADA. A big term for talking about ADA web accessibility are screen readers. So screen readers are the assistive technology, the device that render text and image content as speech or braille output. So people who are visually impaired, they use a screen reader in order to access the content on your site. It carries out a variety of tasks. So it helps them read documents, helps them navigate. They can open and close files, listening to music. It's extremely important that websites are set up to be accessible for use of screen readers. So a big part of what we talk about when we talk about accessibility is, can somebody use a screen reader on your website? And so we actually have a couple of videos prepared for you guys of real disabled users, so 2 visually impaired users navigating a website in 2 different ways. And I think pay attention to their takeaways at the very end for how they experience the website. I think it's really telling.
A screen reader is a program that you can put on your computer that will help someone who is blind navigate and read the content on the screen. It runs completely by keyboard commands rather than the use of a mouse, because that's challenging for someone who can't see the screen. When a website is not accessible, it's the most frustrating experience because I am doing all the commands that I know typically work on a page to either get to an edit field or tell me a heading or different things, but they aren't working like they should. So I hit subscribe after filling out the username and password and all the information I asked for. And it's not telling me anything like if the page reloaded, if there's an error. So I'm going to go to the top of the page and hit H for heading.
How it works. Sign up for a subscription today and receive full day monthly shipment before.
And looks like for some reason it didn't go through, but I don't have any error field. So it's not telling me what's wrong with this page and what I need to fix, and maybe call me impatient, but I don't typically sit around and sit on that page a long time trying to figure this out because it's so frustrating to me, and it's not worth it to me to get all worked up about something when I can just move on to a different site.
Yeah, so I think that last thing that she said is really telling, that, if she encounters a website that isn't accessible, like her first instinct is to just go to a different site, to move on to a different business that is a little bit more accessible. And so here's another one.
Now this one is for mobile view.
Yes.
Is what this gentleman is sharing. It's his experience with a mobile site and accessibility.
I am not able to see what's on the screen. I'm holding it in front of my face right here like I can see it, but I can't. When I unlock the screen here and turn on my speech, I can touch the screen, and instead of activating something that I touch with my finger, it will read it to me and tell me what it is. And if I want to activate it, I touch the screen twice quickly to activate it. And that means that I need to explore the screen with my finger, or there's another command I can use called the swipe right and the swipe left. And that's it. Very similar to using the tab or shift tab keys on a desktop.
Phone number.
MM. Okay, that's probably a month. That's probably a day. Yai, which usually means multiple Ys. I'm going to see if I can figure out how many Ys.
Misspelled words. Edit. Braille table. Deform controls. Links. Headings. Containers. Language.
I'm
Default.
using the rotor
Punctuation. Sum. Speaking rate. 80. Braille screen
to
input.
go
Lines.
to
Words. Characters.
characters.
Tap Y. Tap Y. Tap Y. Tap Y.
Okay, 4 Ys. There's only so much you can control about how the screen reader pronounces Y, but you can certainly label these fields. I'm experiencing, as an assistive technology user, your website differently than a visual person would, but they're part of the same code base. It's the same website. When you invest in accessibility, you're gonna find a lot of things with your website that you didn't even know were issues for everybody.
Pretty eye-opening, isn't that?
Yeah. Yeah, and what he said at the end is very true. Investing in accessibility, caring about accessibility, it's obviously going to help you with all the things we're going to talk about today, but it also will just make your website run better, run smoother for everybody. Okay, so why does web accessibility matter? 1 in 4 adults in the US live with a disability. An accessible business is a welcoming business. So if someone can navigate your website, or if they cannot navigate your website, they often won't shop or book with you. ADA-related lawsuits are on the rise, like Randy mentioned. And accessible websites expand your customer base and improve satisfaction. And another thing to keep in mind, and I was talking about this with our web team the other day, most people eventually will need some sort of assistive technology or device as they get older to access a website. So, we're talking about people who are visually impaired, who are disabled in various ways, but most everybody in the world as they age will become disabled to a certain extent. And so this really does end up mattering for everybody as you're trying to reach a wider and wider audience. So some common challenges specifically for business sites in terms of accessibility. So there's a lot of dynamic content on your website. So you think about online menus or like booking engines, event calendars, all those things require a little bit of extra effort to make accessible. There's obviously a heavy use of images, videos, and PDFs, third-party integration. So you think about reservation systems, ticketing, forms, various kinds. And there's just generally a lack of in-house accessibility expertise. Where do I start? This is a big topic, and a lot of people don't know where to start to make your website accessible. So we're going to talk a little bit about just the general benefits of prioritizing web accessibility. Again, kind of outside it being the right thing to do, outside of this topic we're talking about. There's a lot of benefits to your website for pursuing accessibility. So you do mitigate frivolous lawsuits. There's a rise of lawsuits where people are just trying to essentially make a quick buck on websites that might care about accessibility but are falling short of the standards. It helps you with WCAG conformance. It optimizes your site SEO and extends your market reach. So greater online reach. Being accessible means opening your website to 25% of the population living with a disability. And so that's a 25% increase in the potential reach of your online presence. And I'm thinking about customers with disabilities, seniors, like I said, ESL and non-native English speakers, and even international travelers, people coming to the Chicago Southland, going shopping, that sort of thing. It's important for them as well. It improves your website's SEO. So accessible websites tend to rank better in search. A big part of SEO is whether or not people are going to your website and coming back to your website. Google sees that as an authority marker, and it's going to rank you higher. And so if you have a lot of people coming to your website and having a successful, positive experience, Google's going to flag that and then put you up higher in the search results. Web pages are formatted with accessibility in mind are more likely to be scraped by AI crawlers and AI responses. So as you all probably know, the rise of AI is very real. You think about the Google search right now, the very first thing you see is the AI overview. And so as a big part of SEO right now is optimizing for AI. And accessibility helps a ton with helping those AI crawlers understand what is on the content of your site and making it more likely for them to use it in their ChatGPT responses, Perplexity responses, that sort of thing. So accessibility does mean discoverability as well.
Yeah, and part of that I just wanted to share is if pretend you're, some of you might be retailers, right, or restaurateurs. If you have, oftentimes a restaurant might just have the sign, the name of the restaurant, right? And then an open sign in the window. Think about it as if you were to label every part of the building. I mean, every single part of the building with a sign telling you what it is. Window, door, counter, table, chair, dish, everything. That's a big part of what you do with websites with accessibility is labeling all the images and what they are, describing what a button is very literally versus, just click here for more. It'd be click here to go to read our menu. Like, so that way the screen readers can read that back and go, oh yeah, I know what that button does. So that's a big part of it. And Google loves that, right? Because they're trying to do a good job of providing the best possible results. So, okay.
That's really fun.
So kind of think about that analogy when you talk about how to get a website where it's really easy to interact with.
Yeah. So there's improved customer loyalty as well. So patrons with extra needs often just want a place where they know they're included, just like everyone else. So knowing your business and website are accessible is a big win for repeat customers. If they've had a successful time on your site, they're more likely to come back. And same with your physical presence as well. So talking a little bit specifically about the ADA itself. So the ADA is a civil rights law that was passed in 1990. And it prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities. So it applies to public accommodations, which is now interpreted to include websites and apps. So that's kind of why we're talking about this today. You'll see in a few slides with the title too. There are some developments within the government right now that are making this a pretty hot topic when it comes to website accessibility. And the goal is the same across physical spaces, online spaces. It's an equal access to goods, services, and experiences. And essentially, if you manage or build a digital experience for the public, the law applies to you. So talking about the WCAG, that actually stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And so these are the guidelines, like I said, that are used to define the best practices and design rules for web accessibility. So it's what the ADA uses to know whether or not a website is compliant or not. And it's built around 4 key principles. So it's perceivable. So content must be presented in ways that people can recognize and process using their senses. So kind of what Randy was saying, like, is everything labeled in a way that people are going to be able to understand it? Operable. So all interactive elements must be usable by people with different input methods. It needs to be understandable. So website content needs to be presented in a direct and simple way. And robust. And the robust part is where the code kind of comes in. So making sure your website's code is written in compliance and adherence with standards and can be, compatible with those screen readers and assistive technology that people have. So without accessibility, your website and business can face costly legal risks. So 250,000 plus businesses receive an ADA-related demand letter every year. And demand letters and lawsuits across the board are on the rise. The average settlement cost is about $35K, which is no small amount. And even small businesses and restaurants can be targeted. And so we have a few case studies and examples of that here coming. But it's a big deal right now.
And the reality is it costs a lot less than that lawsuit amount to make these fixes and to have the proof that shows that your site's been corrected and it scores well, and especially blind users can use it effectively. So it's a fraction of that cost, but the law firms know the average award and they go after that. They know what it costs to fix a site, but they always go double or triple over that. And then they're hoping people will just bail and pay it. That's kind of the way it works sometimes. So, but there's definitely ways to mitigate this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you might be thinking too, why are these lawsuits on the rise? Like are disabled users just are they putting forward more lawsuits or what is going on? But the reality is we've actually identified 50 plus law firms whose business model revolves around exploiting the gray area in the ADA. So, one of the reasons we're giving this presentation is the ADA, what web accessibility means. It is very gray. There are standards, but what is conformance, what is not conformance? There is a lot of unknowns, and these law firms are actually using that gray area to target to target websites that, if even if it's a false positive, non-conformant accessibility website, they're going to put forward a lawsuit just to make a quick buck, just to scare people with that large amount that hopefully they'll settle. Often it's not actually disabled users who are suing websites and
No,
businesses.
it's
Yeah.
just lawyers with expert witnesses
Mhm.
hired in most cases. So
Yeah.
blind expert witnesses
Yeah.
is, if you're familiar with how that works. So
So
it is what it is. You just got to do something about it. That's why we're doing this presentation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and the first
Yeah.
step of doing something
Yeah.
about it is mitigating that risk for lawsuits so that you have the space
Yeah.
to actually focus on what accessibility is.
And then doing all the right things to the site
Yeah,
because it needs to be done anyway. So,
absolutely. So kind of how these law firms work is they run automated scans to identify accessibility issues. So they run scans that anybody has access to. So we're going to talk a little bit about, the Wave Chrome tool. There's a Lighthouse that tool that Google has, but they're using these tools that are available to everybody. And anything below a 9 in an AIM score. So an AIM score is kind of an accessibility metric that a lot of these free tools use, and anything below a 9 is technically an open door for a lawsuit. And I will say, just scanning websites day to day like I do, most websites are under a 9. So most websites fall under that threshold, which again is just an open door for a lawsuit. So there's some evidence that suggests that they may target sites that use an accessibility widget like UserWay or Accessibility. That's not confirmed, but that is you might hear that sort of in conversations around this topic. And they often move forward, like I said, with a false positive. So even if your website is accessible, but the scan shows that you're below a 9, firms can move forward. And again, their hope is that people will simply settle instead of fixing the issue. But the problem with that is repeat lawsuits are also happening. So people will often settle after one of these lawsuits, and then their website's still inaccessible, and so the firm comes back with another suit. So a big development with the ADA right now is ADA Title II. So ADA Title II basically means all state and local government bodies must ensure that their services, whether in person or online, are accessible to people with disabilities. So not every business falls under Title II, but any public entity that receives federal funding needs to be ADA compliant under this Title II by April 2026. So basically, if you receive federal funding in any capacity, your website will need to be accessible by April 2026. And again, even if this doesn't necessarily apply to you, Title II it signals a very major shift in web accessibility and really kind of the government cracking down a little bit on making sure that things are more accessible. So kind of again, who's covered by Title II? City and town websites, school district portals, public transportation, online payment, mobile apps and digital forms, any of these things. And the reason this matters for businesses is like if you're partnering or you are a partner that provides a service to public entities that do receive federal funding, this does apply to them.
Yeah, and that would include county sites too.
Yeah.
So city, county, really any form of government,
Mhm.
Park districts, really all of that, all that whole segment,
Mhm.
really important for all of those people to pay attention first. But then, like hospitals, for example, who
Mhm.
get Medicaid, Medicare funding, like those are the really the top tier that need to really get after this quickly. But everybody's at risk of lawsuits.
Yeah.
Right. And we are seeing a trend of a lot of these law firms targeting small business who don't have sophistication to be able to just react quickly, right? They don't have that much proactivity. They don't have an IT department or people like that, like government sometimes has. So.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and if you're looking at this list and you're like, I think maybe we might fall under that, maybe we don't, we'd love to talk with you and look at your website and kind of assess whether or not this is something that you really need to.
Yeah, we
pay
could run
attention to.
scans and give you an idea what needs to be done to mitigate it. So.
So under that Title II, one of the things that people who do fall under Title II will need to have in order to be ADA compliant, in order to be protected under that Title II, is they'll need to have a VPAT. And so VPAT just stands for Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. And it's essentially proof that, we've done an audit on our site. we've found the issues, we've mitigated those issues, and here is the document that's proof. And the funny thing about a VPAT is it's really something that you just need to keep in your desk drawer for a rainy day, because that's the proof you will need if, under Title II, you got a demand letter or there was a lawsuit involved. You'd need that VPAT to show, we're aware of Title II. We've done these things to mitigate inaccessibility, and here's the proof.
Yeah.
So some key dates. There is a little bit of a tier system with Title II right now. So April 24th, 2026 is when state and local governments serving 50,000 or more people will need to be compliant. And then all smaller entities the date for them is April 26th, 2027. So again, depending on where people fall, there is a kind of a two-tier system.
And of course, those dates are tied to potential funding loss. So if you're out of compliance, you could lose federal funding for some reason. So that's kind of a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that ties to government right
Yeah.
now. So it's government to government trying to get that done. And then I'm sure they'll keep, looking at other segments as they go forward.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's signaling for sure.
yeah.
Okay, so the next bit of the presentation is really where we're going to get kind of practical. What can you do now to not only assess whether where your website stands with accessibility, but also what can you do right now before paying a ton of cost right now. So just to define some terms, compliance versus conformance. I think you've probably noticed that I've kind of switched between those two a little bit. And the reason for that, the goal needs to shift from ADA compliance to conformance when we're talking about like risk mitigation. So compliance can often be complicated. It's also often very costly. And honestly, most websites do not need to be fully ADA compliant right now to mitigate their risk for those lawsuits we were talking about. So those law firms, they're taking advantage of that gray area. They target sites with a false positive accessibility scan. And so really to mitigate your risk now, you need to conform to those ADA compliance standards, so that you have the space, to protect yourself against those lawsuits, have the space to focus on accessibility and hopefully become compliant in the future. So that's kind of what this pyramid here means. So organizations across America are getting sued for violating the ADA. Most websites don't intend to violate the ADA. And so we're wanting to mitigate the risk now so that you have time to focus on accessibility. So the first step I would recommend for everyone to do is use those tools that those law firms are using to file those lawsuits. There's a few that we would recommend: the Wave Chrome extension and Lighthouse scores. So both of those things are free tools that you can have in your tool belt. I recommend you write these down. We'll send a copy of this slideshow out afterwards. But those are the two big tools that you can use. They're just plugins that you can have on your browser. It runs an accessibility audit and will give you, what errors, if there's any contrast errors. It'll give you that AIM score to know if you're below a 9. And like we've said, lawsuits often occur after one of these quick scans is done. So if you fix a lot of these top level issues that these scans are finding, it goes a long way in mitigating your risk.
Yeah.
But do note that automated scans only curate about 30% of issues. So, for example, the Wave scan, that's not going to scan your entire site all at once. It just scans the web page that you're on. So if you're on your home page and you run a Wave scan, it's going to find the issues on that page, but not your entire site. So it is important to note that, this is a good first step, but going deeper is also really, really important.
Looking at Google Analytics and your top 10 to 20 pages in terms of traffic would be good, and then measure the scores on those.
Absolutely. So this is another important slide that I'm not going to ask you to write this all down right now, but it's one to keep in mind when we send the slide deck. This is some, top level compliance checklist, things to do, where to start. I'm not going to read through all these, but for example, allow for keyword only navigation. One really easy thing you can do to know whether or not your website is accessible is go to your home page and just start clicking the tab button and notice whether or not the important buttons in your menu in the page itself, if they become highlighted for people to be able to click enter and click it. So that's one really easy way to know whether or not your website is would be able to be used with a screen reader.
Yeah, just because keep in mind a mouse is really used by someone who can see
Mm-hmm.
the cursor.
Yeah.
So pretend there's no cursor, there's no mouse,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
You saw the videos,
Yeah.
they're using keyboards and they're using screen readers and they're touching and they're tapping,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, in the first video, she was using the tab key, if
Yeah.
you noticed. And then the second video, he was using different kind of swipe methods to, highlight different buttons on the
Yeah.
screen to know.
Things that he learned.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, they're amazing at getting past their disability and being able to do things like that.
So now we're going to talk about, let's say you've done all these kind of top level things. What does it really mean to kind of dig into this, actually do kind of that full audit and remediation to protect yourself from those lawsuits to give you that space to work? So a manual accessibility audit is what you need. And that means having your site evaluated by real visually impaired and disabled individuals. They evaluate accessibility levels of your website with their your website's UI, source code, overall usability, focusing on screen reader and assistive technology compatibility, keyboard only navigation like we talked about, and text alternatives. So making sure everything is labeled on the site. So manual audits, like having somebody actually kind of put together what your typical user journey is, encountering any barriers they might find. That's really where you're going to get the insight that accessibility software and scans can't provide you. So it's, I said the wave scan only gives you about 30%. A manual audit is going to give you the rest of that 60% to know how accessible your website is. And essentially how it works is you do an audit. So you do need to do those scans, making sure where you stand with those automated scans, but then having that manual audit of somebody, going through the site using that screen reader. Step 2 is remediating all of that. So looking at the code, what needs to be changed in the code? Is there anything in the content that needs to be fixed? Testing. So once you do remediate, like having somebody go through again, putting that user journey together to make sure there's still no barriers. Deploying all of that, and then providing an accessibility statement. So I'll talk about that in a few slides, but an accessibility statement is a really important thing to have on your website. Making sure you have documentation. So that's part of a manual audit. So, that before and after audit to show these are the issues we had before. Now we don't have those issues. And then Randy said at the very beginning, a big thing to have when it comes to accessibility and mitigating your risk for lawsuits is having some sort of video of a real disabled or visually impaired person successfully using your website. So no matter what a scan says, if you have a real person who's able to use your website and you have a video of that, that goes a long way in defending against a lawsuit or showing that you care about accessibility.
Compliance evidence, basically, and then the VPAT, of course, would be part of the documentation.
Yeah.
This is kind of our process for us, basically ADA compliance when we remediate a site. So we audit and remediate. So these are all our steps that we take. Then there's training on for your team, whoever manages your website. So when they put up new content, they know how to help be more compliant with new content, new photos that they add, how to label things appropriately, and then there's monitoring and support after that. We do continual scans over a period of time to make sure compliance stays where it should, right? Because all it takes is a few changes to your site and it can fall out of compliance, right? So it's not like building a ramp up to a building and it's good for 10 years, 20 years. Websites are living, breathing organisms in a way. So
and it's really a representation of what I've been talking about. It's like getting your site to a good place in the first 3 steps, and then making sure you're maintaining that, because websites do change very often. We have a lot of websites that post blogs regularly, that kind of thing.
New stuff all the time.
They're constantly growing, and so you constantly need to be monitoring your accessibility.
Okay.
So just kind of like what we mentioned, reporting and data is really important to have, because that's really, again, the proof that you're going to have to show whether or not you care about accessibility, whether or not you've gone through the steps. So having an accessibility statement, that's a front-facing document, an accessibility policy, that's what Randy mentioned, making sure your web team, whoever's in charge of your website, has, best practices, their own system for keeping accessibility at the forefront. If you need it, a conformance report, so like a VPAT, having that, and then audit before and after results.
The accessibility statement front facing means it's posted on the website, like in the footer, perhaps.
Yes.
So the accessibility statement, it's kind of like a privacy policy.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll show you an example of that here. But creating a strong accessibility policy, so that internal document is really important. So it's essentially a framework that defines how your business approaches inclusivity, compliance, and digital responsibility. It protects your business by showing a good faith effort to regulators and guides your team towards continuous improvement. So really what this is again, this is not going to be on your website, but to show, like, if you were sued, if you had a document that was your accessibility policy that you use internally and you show that to somebody, it does show a good faith effort to say, no, we do care about compliance. This is what we do on the day-to-day. When we do post a blog, when we do put a new page on our website, this is what we do.
Exactly.
So then the accessibility statement, this is the public-facing document that we've been talking about. And really all this does, it's a public-facing statement. It communicates your organization's accessibility efforts. It acknowledges areas that may not meet standards. So that's always a surprising bit for people is it's important in your accessibility statement to say, we might not be fully compliant, but we do care about this. If you do run into any barriers, please reach out to us. Those good faith efforts really do go a long way, especially within the disability community, but also if you're encountering a lawsuit as well.
Yeah.
And it directs users how to get that help. So again, it demonstrates accountability and transparency. Make it concise. It doesn't need to be a really long landing page or anything like that. Just a short paragraph works, and publish on your website. And so here's an example of an accessibility statement. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dog Days down in Lake of the Ozarks. They actually were sued for inaccessibility issues on their website. And they had to go through a very long process, a very long battle with all of that. And they ended up working with an accessibility team to, remediate a lot of the issues that were found in the lawsuit. But one of the big things they did was put together an accessibility statement. And so their accessibility statement actually lives, I think, because of what they experienced. It's in the very top banner of their website.
It's like, hello.
Yes, it's hello, we care about this, but it's a link to their accessibility statement. It just takes them to a very short page. And this is all that is on the page. And it's their, our commitment to accessibility, talks about how they are committed to accessibility. They do mention, if you experience any issues, please contact customer service. Here's the phone number, email us. What to put in the subject line, all that sort of stuff makes them very accessible to people who are experiencing any sort of problem.
Yeah.
But this is something you can do even today to put on your site. It doesn't have to be, again, you don't have to have gone through the full remediation process to put this on your site. This is literally just a statement saying, we care about this. Please let us know how we can come alongside you in improving your experience on our website.
We care. We will respond to people with disabilities when it comes to our website, and we will support. Right.
Okay, so here's some tools. So a lot of this will be a review, but again, these are all things that you can do right now to help with the accessibility on your site. So the Wave Chrome extension is a really big one. It's private and secure, so that's a big thing. It's not, scraping your content and giving it to an AI tool, for example, or something like that. It's scraping your content and giving you a score right there. It does evaluate just your fully rendered page, so it doesn't necessarily include any sort of code or any sort of back-end issues. It's all kind of front-end contrast, alt image text, that sort of thing. And it's very versatile. So no matter what browser you're using, you can typically have Wave on that browser. And so Lighthouse is the other tool, and this is a Google tool. And this compares your code against those WCAG standards. It also gives you a score. And one really nice thing about the Lighthouse is Wave does this too. Wave will give you, a list of issues, but the Lighthouse score gives you a list of issues and kind of an explanation on how to fix it.
Or
so
how
that,
many times it occurs.
or how many times it occurs. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really helpful especially, if you don't manage your website, the Lighthouse report is a really great thing to just basically copy and paste into an email to your web team, so that they can work on it.
Yeah. It's like, for example, alt image tags, which of course label images with a little mouse over description. You probably have seen that. Then of course the screen reader will read, restaurant on corner of Fifth and Main, right? Right. And that, so it'll show if you have alt image tags missing, it'll say 20 plus. So 20 plus pages have all missing alt image tags. So we know how many are missing. Then we go after them and get it done.
Yeah.
Right. That's the idea. So these are just great tools to be able to use.
And we have developed our own radar. We work with an accessibility partner to help us evaluate websites. And this radar is kind of a combination of, a uniquely developed radar in conjunction with Lighthouse and Wave.
Yep.
So it's kind of all those things coming together. Does a really deep dive on giving you, it gives you the Lighthouse score, gives you the Wave score, and then it will also give you a full list, even more detailed list of all of those issues in your website. So list the issue, number of pages that it's on, and there's a dashboard with this radar. So, when we run this initially on a website, it'll show us the issues. We start working on those issues, and that dashboard will kind of keep us updated on our progress. And so that's really, really helpful because often this can feel like a sea of problems that we're just kind of trying to chip away at. But that dashboard really helps us to see, okay, we've gotten, 5% of the issues done. Now we're at 20%. Now we're at 80%, so it is a very helpful, a little bit more in-depth tool that we are willing to run on any website to help. And the last thing I'll just mention briefly, I mentioned a little bit before accessibility widgets. So you think about like accessibility, user way, those sort of things. Any of those overlays that you'll often see in the bottom corner of a website screen, those are becoming a little bit less best practice on websites. So they can still be a good faith option if you care about accessibility, because essentially what these tools do is they're an overlay. Somebody with a screen reader can click on them and basically edit the website in whatever way they need in order to, navigate the site. But what these law firms are saying about these widgets right now is that they're basically just a band-aid and they don't actually fix any of the deeper issues on the site. And so again, we still think it can be a good faith option. We're not necessarily seeing the relation between having it on your website and getting sued every single time. But it is something to say, it is a good faith first step, but it doesn't make your site fully ADA compliant. In order to do the real work, you're going to need to go a little bit deeper, having those real people using your website and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and having that user way, user way is free, but accessibility is, $400 to $600 a year. So like you could always forego having that and invest in real accessibility, compliance.
Yeah. So this last page, just next steps with everything we've talked about. Step one, I would encourage all of you to come up with an accessibility statement of policy. We'd love to help you with that if that is something that you need on your site. I would encourage you to evaluate your current website accessibility. So use those tools we talked about, the Wave tool, the Lighthouse tool, identify those top level issues and see if your web team can fix them. Review that compliance checklist as you're putting together those reports, make those optimizations, add accessibility to your, just norms and procedures when making changes. So if you do have like a blog or something like that, know what you need to do in terms of accessibility when you post a new piece of content on your website. And then we strongly encourage you to consider pursuing a manual accessibility audit on your site. So doing that full audit, remediation, having that video of a real disabled person using your website is really, really huge. And then having those kind of regular deep dive scans to make sure you remain fully compliant and protected.
Yeah. And it can be really important for businesses that are in buildings, for example, that are grandfathered in, right? So there's a lot of buildings in really old historic towns that sometimes are not, well, usually all the time, not required to redo an entrance, right? That it's still narrow, or there's a step up and a trip hazard because the building was built, in 1890, right? And so it's even more important for a business like that to convey even some issues that somebody that is wheelchair bound, for example, are going to, come across when they come to that business. So there's that side of it too, is communicating challenges. And there are some really good businesses that explain how, accessible, friendly their structure is, right? If that is a, a situation that is, really important, right? If it's a business that, exchanges with the public, the government ones are all pretty much taken care of for the most part, but there are people that I've met personally that do ADA audits on facilities, and they get hired to do it, and they'll go up and down streets and they'll do whole reports that can end up in lawsuits too. They can get hired by attorneys. So there's that side of it. The website can play a role in communicating positive accessibility with the ability that all these things have been taken care of, and they can learn before they come. So there's that too.
Yeah.
So just opening it up to questions, we're happy to answer.
Okay, there's nothing in the chat right now, but okay, so there is a chat question. Do you have recommendations for content that is posted on websites such as flyers? So PDFs, I would imagine that kind of content.
Yeah, so PDFs are a little bit challenging for screen readers to access typically. There are, I would talk to your web team. There are ways to, on the back end, to code a PDF in order for it to be, readable. But typically what I'd recommend, if you have a flyer, instead of posting the PDF, just copying that text onto a landing page can go a long way in helping people be able to access that content. So my recommendation is always, you can copy what's on the PDF, post it and format it onto a landing page as if you're posting just any normal landing page, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because just keep in mind when a PDF is not HTML code. So a web page is HTML code. And then therefore, and it has the ability to be tagged with headings and all image tags and all those good things that are built into the editing tools of, say, WordPress or a custom CMS, right? So when it's a PDF, it's just an Adobe file, and it only works, as you know, if your machine has Adobe Reader and can open it up, right? Either in the browser or in Adobe. So it's good practice. If it's something really critical, make it a web page.
Okay.
You can read the PDF and do the web page, right?
Okay, so the content within the flyer, design recommendations is what the comment was. And what, you can unmute if you guys want to, Paula, if you want to unmute and you can ask that question. Are you saying, like, if you're creating a flyer, what are some design recommendations in addition to putting it onto your website and doing?
Yeah, sorry, I was not able to get to the, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I was not able to get to the beginning of the session, so I'm sorry if I missed that. I just have there's other people that design flyers, and I know that they're not really compliant, and I'm trying to find some simple parameters that are supportive of this, because I can make the website compliant, but the things that are going on it, I need to find a simple way to get everybody on board with that, and that's like almost the hardest thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean the contrast issues still apply to a layout of a flyer or a brochure, right? Yeah, so making sure there's good color contrast, type size would be another, right? Legible fonts. But that is all graphical, that's not code. Right. So all the coding stuff is set that aside when it comes to a PDF that's being appeared. But you can still apply a lot of the good ADA practices for color contrast and size.
And the other thing I mentioned too,
and captioning too.
Yeah, if there's a lot of text on the flyer, making sure that the most important pieces of information are in a little bit bigger, bolder text.
Well, and also the title of the file,
Yeah.
right? So make sure
Yeah.
that there's a PDF there, that there's a readable file name by the screen reader, so they know, okay, great, that's what I need, and
That's a
then,
good point.
yeah,
Mhm.
and then they can print it out separately if needed.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry.
Go.
The, in recreation, the team is, I know all these things. I understand all of them. I'm trying to get everybody, in their realm of abilities to understand some of the simpler things. I know I could look online and get like simple practices, but I
Mhm.
always say that if it's going to end up on our website, we make the website compliant, but the content isn't. So we just have
Mhm.
to, I'm trying to get a simple path to that to help everybody understand it and you know, make it work all the way from the
Yeah.
beginning to the end.
Yeah.
Steve did add a comment here. When you add the alt text to the graphic, be sure to include the flyer's information when you post either on social or on the website.
Yeah. Yeah. Good tip.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep. Very good tip.
definitely.
I know
Again, that
it's a lot
labeling idea.
easier to tie a PDF and just have a link, but it's probably better practices on a website to have it actually as content
Mhm.
Mhm.
as opposed to a PDF.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, PDFs are really, really more friendly to visual people, right? That's the whole reason why you'd put a PDF of a brochure on a website, because it's pretty, right? You want the visual impact. But when you're blind, that's not going to help you, right? So then give them a web page so then they can hear it, right?
Mhm.
Any
That's the
other
main.
questions?
I see one that says, how far back the website needs to be
Oh, yeah.
compliant if you've obtained it since a revamp of the web page.
Yes.
I'm assuming that means, I think to answer that question, it doesn't really matter how far back, as long as you have a point at which you recognized issues and then remediated them. So, there doesn't have to be like historical data that says you're accessible. It's really about, you ran a scan, you did an audit, you found the issues, you have fixed those issues, and then from that point, you have, maintained those best practices for accessibility. So you don't have to show proof that you've been accessible for 2 years or whatever that is. It's more about you found the issues, you've remediated them, and from that point, we continue to care about it.
Yeah, it's very moment in time oriented,
Yeah.
which is very, very much the way lawsuits are all based. Moment in time, right? Now they do like to go back and use old evidence, and there's gray area with old evidence. So it's just the world of law, right? But you do the best you can, right, to mitigate and have that documentation. So you have something, you have the evidence to show on the counter argument, right, versus nothing, right, which is what's happening. People are just getting nasty grams, and it's like, oh, wow, we have nothing, right? And then you scramble. And the worst part of it is the mental capacity to deal with it and the time it takes to just craft a response, right? And maybe even end up in court, or we're just going back and forth with that law firm. You know how distracting that is?
Mhm.
And you just want to avoid that whole situation where you can say, yeah, we have all this. Like, oh, okay. And they just walk away and go to the next one, right? Think about how many total people they can sue. They've got plenty. They got all they need, right? Just don't make it you, right?
Okay, Matthew, you have your hand raised.
That's
Yes, I do. Quick question, kind of going back to the question with the flyers and making that ADA compliant. And obviously, as you were saying, having the content on the website is probably the best. But in our case here, we're a municipality and we're posting agendas for board meetings and committee meetings, which are PDF documents. What can we do so those actual documents can be ADA compliant?
Yeah.
Because actually creating content and you don't want to create a separate page for each agenda.
Mhm. No, I hear you there.
Well, but I do see a lot of agendas that are HTML text on a lot of government sites. That's the way they do it. They don't make them attachments. They publish it all HTML. And now they'll just delete the old stuff and get rid of it over time, and you can always do both. You know, Matthew, I would really recommend that you post it HTML page plus a PDF. That's your only way to really get around it. PDFs are just not very friendly to screen readers. They're just not.
Okay, so HTML
Yeah,
as an
just a
addition in
regular
a
web
sense.
page plus a link, and then label the link as what it is. Super specific, right?
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
no problem. Yep. I know
Well,
it's extra work, but I mean, that situation right there, super important, right? Agendas for public meetings. Yeah. Talk about having to be accessible to all. You know, government, public meetings, big one, right? So thanks for bringing that up.
okay, Steve made a comment here. PDF docs can be made accessible. Adobe has free tutorials. Search Adobe Experience League. Word docs can be made accessible prior to saving through Word.
Yeah, and as Zach said, there are ways of doing it. It's just, I'm just recommending the fail safe.
Yeah.
If it's really, really important public document, but
Yeah.
you can do some other things to make them more accessible.
Yeah, and even with that, I would just make very sure that a screen reader will still be able to access that content. So there's a lot of tools out there, and I'm sure this is a good tool, but there's a lot of tools out there that will claim accessibility or claim, that people will be able to read it. But unless it's compatible with an actual screen reader assistive device, it's not accessible. And so HTML is like a for sure way to go about making sure a screen reader can access that. And Adobe, that looks like it could be a tool, but I would just make sure with that a screen reader can access it.
Yeah, if
Like that's cool.
if I was a large government entity, I would actually own a screen reader and do tests on it,
Just gonna say.
you know. Just because, I mean, government is just such a target, right? So, okay,
Thanks, Steve.
thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it said Adobe and Word have ADA checker built in, but yes, test it. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a good, I was thinking the same
That is
thing,
good.
having a reader and testing it that way.
Well, and that's why those videos are so important too. At the end of the day, you can do a lot of work, but if a real person can't access it and encounters barriers, then that work is for naught. So that's why that testing and that proof is really, really important when it comes to this conversation.
Yep.
Well, it's like back in the day, you could hire people to see if your physical space, like you said, was ADA compliant, or you just sit in a wheelchair and try to navigate your hotel. Did it work? What did you learn from that? So it's same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah, the more testing and proof, the better.
Okay, I will be sending everybody a follow-up email with the slide deck. And thank you so much, Randy, and your team for this presentation. I sat through it for the second time, and I can't see it enough. I mean, it's so important, and we're going to be working on our site to get to that level of accessibility as well. So, thank you,
if anybody
everybody.
needs help, Kim has our.
Go ahead. Oh, I think we have a little bit, I think he was frozen here. I do have Randy's information. I can certainly share it with everybody. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day and happy holidays.